Well, everybody needs to chill out on hating on Greg Sankey in the SEC. Locked On SEC crossover starts now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into the show, a crossover edition of Locked On SEC and Locked On Gamecocks. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And doing a little bit of a crossover show here. Chris Gordy here, Locked On SEC. Chris Marler, Locked On Gamecocks. And Marler, the last 24 hours or so, after Greg Sankey spoke at the SEC meetings down in Destin, man, I've been like Jon Snow out in the field with the sword, just taking on all these Big 10 and Big 12 and WAC and ACC people out there. Chill the bleep out. And you've got a piece up kind of echoing the same sentiment.
I do. I don't really get it. I guess I don't really get it. I understand. It's like I hate to do this from the standpoint of like, let's just be like SEC homers. But if every which way you look at it, if you want to attack this thing from a place of logic and reason, which is very seldomly a place that fans love to start or ever even end up in their arguments about college football, and that's fine. I get it. Like we're all fans of something, and I totally understand that. But if you want to go at it from a place of logic and reason, you want to look at it and be like, well, why do they deserve 4 teams in? I don't know. Probably because over the last 20 years, they've been the most dominant conference in the country. And sure, the last 2 have been great. But Sankey brought up a good point that people aren't talking enough about, in my opinion. And that is, if you did the straight seeding last year, based off the college football playoff committee's actual rankings, the SEC would have had 2 of the top 4 teams in again. And it's kind of crazy to me that we have this idea that, well, they didn't win at all, so like they obviously aren't good anymore. Because for such a long time, I listened to conferences and their fans and fans from teams of those conferences make statements and complain about, well, no, we're still really good. And it was all based off the idea, just because we didn't win the national championship doesn't mean that we don't have a deep conference, that we don't have good teams in this conference or whatever. We just came up short. And now all of a sudden, this argument that, well, the SEC lost or didn't win a national championship for 2 years in a row, didn't play for it 2 years in a row. Obviously, the playing field's even, and now everything's changed, and the SEC is nowhere near as good as we thought. And it's hilarious to me that people are saying that with a straight face and not actually announcing what it is, which is SEC fatigue. And I get it, but it's just SEC fatigue.
Well, the other part of this, too, is, and I brought this up, this is what conference expansion was going to bring on, right? I mean, you want the SEC to expand, and they expand with 2 monster brands like right. Oklahoma and Texas, and we go to 16 teams. Of course we deserve more seats at the table. Like, what are you talking about? Same thing with the Big 10 that has Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State and all these brands, and they add Oregon, USC, UCLA, and I know USC and UCLA are down, but those are monster brands in college athletics. Like, yes, they deserve more seats at the table. And when you're these other peddling conferences going, well, we'll take the remnants of the Pac-12. Oh, yeah, we'll take SMU. Like, okay, great, but, like, you don't get more seats at the table. And so I'm just baffled by these people that come on like, oh, you don't deserve automatic seats. Well, this is where it's headed, dude. Like it or not, and the SEC's made it clear. If y'all don't want to play by the rules, fine. We'll go play our own thing.
Right.
Let me know how the college football playoff works out when all you have is Clemson, Florida State, SMU, Boise. I mean, who's going to watch that?
Well, so and let's go back to using last year's model as the main argument, right? Because that's what so many people are like. It's this very real prisoner of the moment revisionist history that people are writing in real time. And like I said this in the article. Check it out, LouisianaSports.net. Shameless plug. When we were talking about this, it was like the idea that Sankey has become the villain when he is one of 2 commissioners that are pushing for 4 automatic bids. And by the way, he's one of 4 commissioners that are pushing for this new model and like all pushing for what's best for their conference. You brought the exact word you used was the remnants of the Pac-12 going to the Big 12, right? And teams going to the ACC. Let's use last year's model and look at it. It's not the fact that you had like 4 SEC teams get in because you had 3 left out in the cold. And I don't understand the argument that people are still making about it, where it's like the SEC's gotten their way about everything. The SEC quite literally just got into or got finished the season where they didn't get their way, right? Where SMU, who was 11-1, they got in because of a close loss to Clemson. They didn't have a single win over a ranked opponent in the entire regular season. Indiana, you talk about the vaunted Big Ten, who adds 4 teams to get to 18 just so they can get 4 teams in. They play, listen, you hear about Mercer all the time. You hear about all these FCS teams all the time. Well, SEC only plays 8 games, and they're playing FCS opponents in November. Well, explain to me how we got to the month of November, and Indiana not only had a ranked team, but didn't even play a team that had a winning record up until they played Ohio State. Like, think about what they hadn't played a team with a winning record by the time it was post-Halloween, pre-Thanksgiving. That is almost impossible to do. So if you're going to argue with the fact that, like, those teams deserve to get in and then get spanked by Notre Dame or whoever else or Penn State or whoever they're playing, it seems very disingenuous that you're saying it's okay for this brand of teams, and then you're saying all of a sudden, like, these other teams are being held to a different standard, and those teams just so happen to be from the SEC.
Well, what's wild to me is, Marler, we look back at the last 2 national champions, and, you know, both teams played a 9-game Big Ten schedule, but look at their non-cons. I mean, Michigan 2 years ago, their non-conference was ECU, UNLV, and Bowling Green, and Ohio State last year was Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall. So the SEC going out of their way to schedule these big week 1 opponents, the committee has shown they don't give a damn. You're not going to get any extra credit for scheduling a good opponent. In fact, they're going to hurt you more, even if it's a close loss to a top 5 opponent, than if you had just scheduled Akron, because all they care about is wins over losses. And I get it, wins should matter, but at the end of the day, like, they're rewarding mediocrity in the non-con. I credit Ohio State going to schedule in Texas week 1 this year. Yeah, they get them at home, by the way, but, like, at least you're going out and trying something else. Whereas the SEC, everybody keeps pointing, I'm going, why would you guys play 9-game conference schedule? Well, okay, we will, but you're going to lose a lot of these week 1 marquee games that everybody's coming to love.
And you're also, what you're going to lose after that. Here's what those fans don't realize they're going to lose, like, outside, because again, you're moving the goalposts on every single argument you're trying to make against the SEC, primarily, in my opinion, because it's SEC fatigue. The moment you give up, the moment you force the SEC into a 9-game conference schedule is the exact moment you are going to be held into a contract where you're getting 4 teams in no matter what. There is no chance Greg Sankey is going to – I'm getting shushed over here. There is no chance you're going to get a 9-game conference schedule year in, year out, and then say, but we'll see if you get 4 teams in. Those 2 things are going to go hand in hand, and they should. I am a massive proponent of not switching to 9 games no matter what. I think it's an overreaction from last year. I think that's something we probably won't see as much again. And again, by the way, like you said, if you're just rewarding the wins, you want to know a fun fact about Michigan and their non-conference? Michigan in 2024, they played Nebraska, and it was on 2023. They played Nebraska on September 30th. You're good with calendars. Is September 30th? What day of the month is that?
That's the end of the month.
It's the very last day of the month. That was the first non-home game they had played in the month, away from Ann Arbor, since 2019. They hadn't played one out of the state of Michigan since 2019 until the end of the month in 2023. That's the kind of schedules that we're setting up here. Your East Carolina, who's like the 128th ranked team in the country, all these other teams, like, listen, like Indiana, I hear this argument all the time. Well, Indiana couldn't help their schedule. People forget that Indiana had Louisville on that schedule. And the moment they hired their new coach, Coach Signetti, they got rid of that game. They got rid of Louisville as a Power 4 team and a bowl-eligible team, and they took an FCS opponent instead. These are all things that happened in real life. And somehow the big bad wolf and the boogeyman that's the SEC continues to kind of shoulder this weird misguided blame. And it's become so stupid. So I'm telling you right now, if you're a fan of a different conference, fine, get it. I love when college football is inclusive and we get to see teams out west, like in Colorado and other teams from the Big 12, and be included if they deserve it. But the moment you decide to force this conference into playing 9 conference games is the moment you're going to have at least 4 teams in the playoff every single year.
Well, how close are we to that 9-game schedule? We'll give you the latest from the discussions at the SEC meetings in Destin coming your way in just a second. First, I want to remind you guys about our friends over at Monarch Money. And look, if you ever check your bank account and wonder where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, it's easy to lose track on all those expenditures you got going. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. They're going to be your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money, look, it's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you just stop, or you can stop managing your money and start building your wealth. When you start using Monarch Money, you're going to realize just how much you're spending on food delivery. If I told you how much money Chris Marler spends on Uber Eats every week, my goodness, we could fund a third world country. But it's going to make you want to budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. Go take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com. Get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. monarchmoney.com. Check them out today. We continue our conversation with our buddy Chris Marler. Locked on Gamecocks, Locked on SEC here with Chris Gordy and Marler. We got some news. We're talking a little bit about the SEC.
Hold on. This is my Chick-fil-A being ordered. So give me a second.
The SEC possibly moving to a 9-game conference schedule, and some of the tidbits yesterday, some of the ADs and coaches talking yesterday. Trev Alberts, Texas A&M athletic director, he said that moving to a 9-game conference schedule really depends on those CFP spots. He said there's positive movement, but it's clear they are not moving until those spots are figured out. And then Oklahoma AD Joe Castiglione said a vote on the 9-game conference schedule this week would surprise him. He said, too, CFP format needs to be decided. He said, we'll get the postseason figured out, but it is paramount to make sure to keep the regular season relevant. So we're not going to get a resolution on this because the College Football Playoff Committee is not going to come out this week and just suddenly go, all right, guys, we're doing 16 games. And yes, SEC and Big Ten, 4 spots guaranteed. So until we get that, the SEC is going to sit at 8 games. And this is where I just wonder, Marler, about the 2026 schedule. Like, are we going to stick with 8 again? Because they're going to have to make an announcement on that in the coming weeks to months.
I think they're going to go to 9. I personally hate it because I've said this over and over again. If you're playing behind this thinly veiled load of BS from the Big Ten, especially, that's where I'll aim my sights here. If you're telling me that, well, we played 9 conference games, and one of those is a brunch time 11 a.m. kickoff in front of 1,200 fans at Purdue, then fine. Like I'll take the Mercer game and a team that made the FCS playoffs over Purdue any day of the week. Like I'm not saying they would beat them. I am saying that like you lose a lot of credibility by being, we played a 9-game conference schedule. Well, how did you play a 9-game conference schedule and then have one team inside the top 35 of strength of schedule rankings at the end of last year's regular season? Because the SEC, on the other hand, all 16 teams were ranked 32nd or higher. So all in the top 32 of the country in terms of strength of schedule. It seems dumb to me. And the thing I always say too is this, like if the Big Ten, if you guys are so gung-ho about scheduling those games and having, I don't care. Schedule 8, schedule 7 conference games if you want. Schedule 2 FCS teams every year. Schedule an FCS team from the South, make them come play up north and stop, talking about how no one wants to play in the cold weather or something like that. None of us care down here. But if you're the SEC and you have gone to, in the last 19 years, you have gone to the national championship in 16 of 19 years, you have won 13 national titles in the last 19 years, and you've had 3 SEC versus SEC national title games since 2011, why would you change out of 8? Why would you change an 8-game conference schedule? It's like if somebody had been making pasta their entire life and it was really, really good and it was a huge bestseller, and then somebody came in with a gluten allergy. It was like, oh, by the way, I don't like this. You need to change it. No. Take you and your kid that's probably allergic to peanuts and peanut butter and go down the road and go to a different restaurant. Like, there's no reason to change this.
Well, but if somebody comes in and says, I will give you $1 million to make gluten-free pasta, you're going to do it, right? So that's the incentive, is the money. I mean, ESPN, Disney have said hey, look, a 9th conference game? We just saw what this triple headers got us in ratings last year. Hell yeah, brother. We got that money. Let's go, Greg Sankey. And Sankey goes, all right, we could do that, but there's a lot of things to get figured out. And this is where I bring your Gamecock fans in here, Marler, because one thing that could happen is if you go from 8 to 9 conference games, okay, that means from 4 to 3 non-conference games. South Carolina Clemson is an important rivalry that the fans love. That could be in jeopardy, because if I'm Shane Beamer, I'm sitting there going, dude, look, we'll go to 9 conference games, but you're adding Georgia to my schedule, or Florida, or Alabama. Guess what, Clemson? Like, I got to get rid of that game, because it's going to be a potential, another potential loss for me. I just don't know how you protect those permanent non-conference games in the SEC, because a lot of the coaches are going to be looking at that as even tougher. Like, I'm going to lose my job if we keep that game.
Yeah, I think the thing with South Carolina, I always say this too, is I don't think South Carolina is running from anyone. I don't think South Carolina is running from an easier schedule. So I don't think Beamer, especially Beamer, is going to ever make that decision to not play that game. I'll just say this. I don't care how it sounds. I think if anybody was to make that decision down the line, it would be Dabo, because Dabo, like that means that Clemson would also have to go to a 9-game coverage schedule. And the one who seems like he would openly complain about it more would probably be them. The schedule has always been the schedule for South Carolina. They've played Georgia every year up until last year for, God knows how long, I guess, like since like 92. Florida, the same way. I do think that you're going to start seeing stuff, though, like outside of this state, you move one state over to the west, just hop on 20 West and head over to Georgia. Georgia versus Georgia Tech, despite what happened last year, has been a crazy one-sided rivalry. I mean, it's a ridiculous one-sided rivalry. And so that's a game that absolutely could be taken off the books, because there's no reason to really play it if you're Georgia Tech, especially if you're not trying to get to a national title game. You're trying to get to bowl games every year and make your program relevant. So I don't know if South Carolina, I don't think that they would ever get rid of that game. It means too much to the state. I think it means too much to this team. And from a prideful standpoint, I don't think they would do it. But dude, like it's crazy that we're even being talked about having to force them into this position, because the other easy way to do it is, hey, Big 10, Big 12, play 8 games. Play 8 games and have everyone play the same amount of non-conference games, or everyone play 9, but then everyone has to play 1 non-con game. It's this whole thing has been decided, like people have decided that Sankey is the one I think that's like driving it. And really it's way more of what the Big 10 and Big 12 have already done by going to 9 games and then openly complaining about how somehow, even though their strength of schedule doesn't match their cries, that they're doing all this hard work. It's like, you guys need to catch up to us. It's like, guys, we just played. we just went up to the big house if you're Texas, right? Like it doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
Yeah, Brian Kelly every year kills himself week 1 by losing, losing a tough knock. Like, I think LSU fans are going, Brian Kelly, stop scheduling these.
Yeah.
A Mercer and be done with it. But he's like, nope, USC and at Clemson this year. Like, what are you doing, dude? I will say
a 2:30 game where we're going to have at least a third of the crowd die of heat exhaustion in the stands in Death Valley.
Right. I will say, for Georgia's sake, because I can already see people coming at him now, Georgia's first non-conference opponent is Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
That is only there because it was originally supposed to be Oklahoma. And Greg Sankey and the SEC said, no, they're in the conference, so let's get rid of that game. So people are going to start, I can already hear them now. People are going to be coming for Georgia going, well, their non-conference is Marshall and Austin Peay and Charlotte and Georgia Tech. Like, yes, but they have played Clemson. They've played some great non-conference games over the years. And, Alabama, LSU always seem up for the task of going to play a tough non-conference opponent week 1. And,
Well, real quick on this, and I think people don't realize this, and this is the one thing I will blame Sankey for, and he's going to have to figure out a thing from a scheduling standpoint, that he's going to have to figure out how to fix, okay? Because these schedules are made a long time in advance, and they can easily be changed. We saw it in 2020. We saw, like I mentioned, Indiana do it earlier. But these are the things that, like, fans get excited about, and you want to be able to travel and go to games and see new cities and see new campuses and all that kind of stuff. But before Texas was ever announced, I mean, that was announced, Texas and OU were coming in 2021, July of 2021. Before that was ever announced, you had 4 teams out of the 14 in the SEC that had gone out of their way to make sure they scheduled at least 2 Power 5 conference opponents in every year, or at least in 5 to 10 of the next seasons. And that was Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, and Alabama. Those 4 teams had scheduled at least 2 Power 5 opponents every year for the next 5 to 10 years. Now, 3 of those teams are because you had an inherently built in-game, in-state rivalry with a team from the outer conference. Bama was the other. They had a bunch of those. You're going to see those games, like you said, fall from the wayside, because if you're talking about, well, we only played 8 conference games, but you're also scheduling. I know one year Bama's got like Ohio State and Notre Dame in the same season. Wave bye-bye to that immediately. Like, the whole thing, it seems very, very – it's like that – what's that meme where it's like the guy's like shoots someone and he's like, why would you make me do this? That seems to be like what the entire Big Ten like and Big 12 like cries have become.
Yeah, you could just follow the Lane Kiffin approach and just schedule the worst ACC opponent you could find as your tough non-conference game. All right, when we return here, we're going to hit on some of the other headlines we'll throw at Marler coming from SEC meetings down in Destin. Right along here, a crossover edition, Locked On SEC, Locked On Gamecocks, Chris Gordy and Chris Marler. And Marler, Kirby Smart was at the podium yesterday, and I read this, Kirby saying the biggest decision that has to be made right now in college football by far is when is the portal window, and is there one or is there two? He did say, look, no crying from the yacht. He gets it. Like, we're getting paid a ton, but I would agree that is the one and the easiest one to figure out. Close the spring portal. Let's do the one portal, open and close, and be done with this.
I agree. I think that's like the clearest like fix, an easiest fix that you can make in a long list of things that you probably need to be at least tinkered a little bit. So I would agree. I think that's one that you have to do. But the thing is like South Carolina doesn't have this problem the same as Georgia, clearly, because and that's not like taking a shot at Kirby, because I know he's got a very tough job, but South Carolina comes into this like you don't have a ton of questions. Alabama was the same way. Like, there's a lot of other teams across the SEC that didn't lose a ton in the spring portal window, but Georgia clearly did. And I think he still makes a really, really good point. And the point being was like, you cannot go into May or late April when like you got kids that are going through finals and you're by all means going into summer and recruiting for the next year. You don't need to be worried about, hey, who do I still have on this roster? Like, that's the one thing. I think we've lost so much of college football to where it's like it's hard to get super pumped about, well, who do I have on, like this guy came in as a recruit and then he transferred 2 other times, and we got other guys coming in from all over the place. I think you earn some of that back from the fans if you have one portal window and there's at least familiarity with the team. I'll tell you whose job it would make easier than anyone's is Phil Steele. That guy, I feel awful for that guy. Every single offseason, I'm like, when are we getting this damn magazine? And then I think about there's still 87,000 players in the portal. So what's he going to do?
God, you need at least 6 months to sort out Ole Miss's quarterback room. I mean, that's good.
Phil Steele is actually playing quarterback for Ole Miss this year.
It's like, I'm in, I'm out. No, I transferred. Right. No, transfer. Like, those are the crazy. I love the on-3 graphics where it's like 6 schools and it's like 3 of those were this offseason. Like,
yeah. Have you seen the ones with the arrows usually pointing this way and then it'll point back? Because they dipped in and then came back out and you're like, what is going on?
It is insane. How about Steve Sarkisian? He said at the podium yesterday, the idea we got to wrap our brain around is I don't think we'll see an undefeated national champion again. Yeah, when you look at Ohio State last year, had to play 16 games en route to a championship. They lost 2 in the regular season, obviously undefeated in the playoff. But, yeah, I kind of agree with that. I don't think we're going to see any 15-0, 16-0 teams anytime soon.
The only time that's going to matter is when we see these off-season lists of the greatest teams of all time and how different that's going to be. It'll be fun trying to explain to, like, our kids or the youths one day been like, wait, LSU went 15-0. Like, oh yeah, sit down. Let me tell you about that 2019 LSU team playing 7 top 10 teams and still going 15-0, because that kind of stuff, it's just so odd. Cause like it gives you way more leniency in the regular season. Clearly we saw it with Ohio State. But it does also kind of, it feels like it creates this very weird, like, cliff of like, if you lose more than 2, you're done. And it used to be, that's just like, I think the game changing in terms of when I was growing up, you were growing up, you're much older than I am, obviously. So like, yeah, that's payback for the Uber Eats comment. But like back in the day, it was like, if you lose once, you're probably done for the season. Then you see like the late 2000s, all that kind of stuff. It's like, well, if you could lose once and still get in now, anything beyond 2, man, as South Carolina had to learn last year, you're out.
Just mentioned Steve Sarkisian. Speaking of Texas, how about this story came out yesterday? I didn't realize this. The Longhorns, not Fox, were the ones that shut down the idea of moving this game. That they said basically, oh, we can move this to Sunday night and you can play Ohio State in Columbus on Sunday night, and Steve Sarkisian and Texas were like, no, we're good. We'll stick with the big noon kickoff. So I just thought that was interesting. For all the Fox, I apologize. For all the vitriol Fox Sports got on this, they tried to move it. They wanted to make it a primetime thing. And Texas went, let's see, play at night in Columbus on a Sunday night on a holiday weekend, or play early at noon we'll do the noon game. Let's do that one. So
I'm shocked that they even gave Texas the option to make that decision, because I as a fan and somebody that doesn't care about either one of those teams would love if they could both lose, to be honest. Moving that game to Sunday would be awesome. It gives me remember a couple of years ago we had that kickoff, I think it was 2018. LSU played Miami on Sunday night. We had it last year with LSU Southern Cal. I do love that idea. It sucks that it is. I mean, I don't know why you would give Texas the option in that situation.
Well, we do get that game this year. It is going to be, I want to say it's Notre Dame, Miami, maybe.
It's something.
It's it's one of those games that we're getting. One other thing here, I did see this Longhorns argued we would have one less day of rest heading into the next week. Brother, you come home and play San Jose State. I think Arch and company would be okay with one less day of rest getting ready for San Jose State. So that one was a little bit weak to me. A few other notes here. How about Mike Elko from A&M saying yesterday he was asked to reflect on their collapse down the season. He said, well, we had losses to South Carolina, Auburn, and Texas. It was a lot of things in those situations we were not in before. Back-to-back night games on the road as the team being hunted. We got to learn how to be the team that's hunted. I don't know. To me, I heard that from Elko, and it just sounded a little bit like weak sauce to me.
I couldn't hear you because Lenore Sellers just scored again on Mike Elko's defense. So you were paid a great deal of money to not go 7-5 or 8-4, and you win 8-4, 8-5, whatever it was. I feel bad for Elko in a sense, because it's like, listen, you started out 7-1, and they were a good football team. I think Marcel Reed's going to be really good. That's going to be a tough game for Carolina to go back there this year, by all means. But you came into Williams-Brice, and you had people in. You had people in College Station and fans from around there, Casey Smith, that were saying that they were going to destroy this defense. You couldn't build. How are you going to stop Marcel Reed? It was 20-20 at the half, and you lose by 24. So I have a hard time buying into that. A&M got into a season last year, dude, where they didn't have to play Ole Miss, they didn't have to play Bama, and they avoided a lot of. They didn't have to play Georgia. They avoided a lot of good teams, and in the fact that they still had that collapse, it part of me is just wondering if that entire stadium and campus really is built on a Indian burial ground, because at this point it's like, what is going on?
How about the Auburn Tigers? Hugh Freeze talking yesterday. He was asked about what traits attracted him to Jackson Arnold. He said, well, he's got the strength, the arm strength, the mobility. He just needs some confidence, and I think our receiver room will help him with that. Look, the receivers I'm not worried about at Auburn. I'm worried about Jackson Arnold, but the confidence, is this where we are, where we got to coach up quarterbacks that lose their confidence?
Under Hugh Freeze? Yes, 1,000%. Do you remember the relationship he had with Peyton Thorne a year ago and how openly toxic it was, and the stuff that he was saying, and the stuff that he was there were so many conflicting reports from people around that program that were of what he was saying to Peyton Thorne, the blame that he was getting, the blame that he wasn't putting on himself. Listen, I know that the good book that he talks about all the time tells you to put others first, but that doesn't mean put others first when it comes to blame, and that's something he has done for quite some time as a head coach.
Last thing for you here, Marler. Ryan Williams named one of the cover athletes for College Football 26. He and Jeremiah Smith from or what am I trying to say?
Michigan.
Ohio State. Yeah, Ohio State. They're both on the regular cover, but of course the deluxe cover features many of the different faces around. And shout out Lenore Sellers, makes the cover there. Garrett Nussmeier. There was one missing face glaring, and it was no Arch Manning and no Steve Sarkisian, but it was reported that they decided to opt out of the photo shoot. But pretty good that Lenore winds up there on the cover.
I love that. I love the fact Dylan Stewart was on there for sure. Love the fact that Dylan Stewart was on.
It was Dylan Stewart. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, my bad. Somebody told me Lenore's, but yeah, it was Dylan Stewart.
the fact that he was on it, and then 4 rows behind him was a Clemson band member. That was a chef's kiss for South Carolina fans. Now, I will tell you this: in the deluxe edition, I would not be surprised if instead of Arch Manning being on the cover, there's just like a 2-hour get ready with me skincare routine they're going to show of Arch, or him doing literally anything. Here's Arch starting his car. Here's Arch, I don't know, going to class. Here's Arch writing down notes. Like, everything this kid does has already been overblown. So I would not be surprised if that package is also included in the actual game itself.
Yeah, it's going to be wild. But yeah, kudos to Dylan Stewart making the list. I did see is that Mississippi State coach on the cover there? I think that's a little bit of a reach, right?
I did not see Jeff Lebby. Did Jeff Lebby make it?
Yeah, I'm looking at the cover right now. It looks like Jeff Lebby throwing up his numbers or something. I don't know what he's doing. I did think it was
cool that they did well, they had who's the kid from Arizona State? And I say kid because he's like 12 years old. He's younger than I am. Who's the coach from Allie? Producer Allie. Who was the coach at Arizona State that used to be at Auburn? Dillingham. Kenny Dillingham.
Kenny Dillingham, yeah.
Somehow help you guys are. Kenny Dillingham's on there, and he's like doing like the shocker thing. I think or the forks up thing. But I think one of the coolest parts of that whole thing was they, on the deluxe cover, they included all of the old, or several of the old cover athletes in the actual thing, which I thought was cool. Like Reggie Bush, Denard Robinson from Michigan, Tim Tebow. I thought that was really neat. Yeah,
real quick, just, I'm like, let's pull the graphic up here because I've watched this whole thing. Okay, there's Dylan Stewart. There's that is Jeff Lebby, dead center. Is that not?
No, that's Kenny Dillingham.
That's Kenny Dillingham. Okay, so Webb bots this whole thing. This whole thing is bots. So just go look at the.
I'm seeing a lot more Clemson than I originally saw. But I'm just don't get this cover, not because it doesn't look great, but because if you stare into the eyes of that cracked out tiger back there next to the first down marker, there's no telling what'll happen. There's no telling.
Well, I've learned an important lesson here. Don't bring up something on the show that you haven't researched yet or looked at. That's what I went by what somebody told me, and then didn't even look at the graphics. So
leave that for Locked On Big 12.
We will leave that during the concept Big 12. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC Locked On Gamecocks crossover edition. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. For your second listen, you can check out Brian Smith. He's got the Portal Show with the latest rumors and portal signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. For Chris Marler, I'm Chris Gordy. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Come on back and see us.